Welcome to Simulated Reality. Today with us we have Dr. Karthik Ramesh, the Global Innovation Head of Emids and industry expert in the field of AI implementation, AI ethics. And for the reason we have him here today, that is his thoughts on robo-rights. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Krishna. I'm pretty excited to be here at Analytics India magazine.
Yeah. So, Dr. Karthik, just to start things off, how would you define a robot per se, given that we have so many forms of it, and obviously Hollywood has put a very different image of that. How would you define an intelligent robot?
I think it's a great question to start with because I think humans by nature, we are emotional, right? And we perceive things basis our emotions. So a definition of a robot is going to be very contextual. But I prefer, Isaac Asimov's definition where he says that a robot is a machine that can simulate or imitate human actions either through its movements, or the kind of functions or operations it performs in a pretty predetermined and predefined manner. That's the way I look at it. If you ask me from a purely technology or scientific context, but if you look at it, people who look at robots as beings, if you will, right, and which is where I think this podcast is going to pivot to, they may not like the fact that a robot is actually a machine, right? There is a state of being possibly, right? So let's go ahead in this conversation and see how we redefine what a robot is possibly at the end.
I mean, as things stand today, I mean, robo-rights or we do tend to anthropomorphize robots a lot, or even for the latest example, the Google engineer who told that Lambda was sentient. Like, we have this nature that we think every other machine or anything we interact with has human abilities, but till date I don't think a robot has kind of achieved that apart from Sophia. So given that is our tendency, I mean, is it really a good place to start off by saying that these machines deserve rights or these things have emotions, even though it clearly doesn't?
So let's kind of take a step back, and it's kind of, I would say, providential that I'm talking about robo rights today here, because I'm just coming from a packed day where we started off at a school in Bangalore. And I'm a bit of a storyteller, and let me tell you, in this school, which we kind of refurbished as part of our sustainability initiative, we taught or trained the kids on how they build robots or miniature robots, automation, functionality, say on a breadboard and Arduino kits, the whole works, right? And we also taught them how to build a robot as a miniature rover, the kind you see on space missions. What we noticed, is the children latched onto the learning of robotics very quickly. Now, the reason I mention this, in my mind, when I looked at them demonstrating today, for them, the robot was not a thing. Mm-hmm. As a child, they had already developed a kind of an association, or if I can say, a belonging with the robot. So it is difficult for us to leave the premises with the kits disassembled, right? So if I look at it, therefore, when I said take a step back, you look at how people perceive robots and how do they perceive robo rights today. We'll have to kind of disassociate, if I can say, the emotions associated with seeing the robot as just another thing, or seeing a robot as a sentient being which has feelings, which can emote, which can possibly react and respond as today's robots do. And today, interestingly, one of the IEEE reports was talking about the latest count of industrial robots, for example, is crossing almost 2.5 million, close to 3 million today, right? There are 3 million active industrial robots. And I want to give another anecdote here when we talk about robo rights. I recently completed a postgraduate program, it's like last week in IISc Bangalore. And the whole theme, what attracted me to that program, along with a lot of other senior executives, was the fact that we were learning about smart manufacturing, if you will, right? So applying IoT. So when you look at it in a factory setup, right? And I've encountered this situation elsewhere, but let me take an example of a factory. So when you look at what a robot is supposed to do in a factory layout, right? So we've seen examples of them kind of autonomously moving. The advanced robots can do that, but the kind we have in manufacturing are mostly stationary, or they have a trail or a path to which they are fixed, and they know that they need to adjust themselves in certain coordinates or positions, and then perform certain predetermined functionality, right? Now, the reason I gave you this second example is when you look at how people who do not relate to robots in an industrial setup, let's say in a car manufacturing facility or an electric car manufacturing facility, how they would see a robot, right? So the reaction which the robot kind of triggers in your mind is, especially people who don't relate to technology well and see it as a replacement of a human in terms of work functionality, there is a sense of insecurity. There is a sense of fear. Now, where I'm leading to with all of these anecdotes and examples to you is that today the problem or the question is not that are robo rights required. The question is, how are humans going to deal with it, right? Because there is already, if I can call it, and I'm not a psychologist to use this term, but there's some kind of social anxiety which builds into people who constantly interact with robots. Now, you spoke about a big tech company and somebody thinking that the bot is actually Sentinel. So how do I look at my phone, for example, right? Today, if you see the world around us, right, and I was just contemplating on this 25 years back, touchscreen phone was non-existent. But today we are so much into the phone, and we are in an era of metaverse, of avatars, of 3D objects. So I think more than half the time, we are all leading a life of alternate reality. So it's not just do robots have rights, but we as humans in the real world, if you will, within quotes, and I put the real within quotes intentionally, are we, as we perceive the world to be more virtual, more remote, more automated, are we addressing this important question in our mind as to how we will treat each other when tomorrow we enter, say, a world of metaverse, when we as humans enter a 3D animated world, 3D virtual world. Remember, we will be a character there. And there are, again, so many Hollywood movies which talk about games, video games becoming real life. Now,
Right.
It's important for us, therefore, to look at this not just from a technology perspective, therefore, look at it from the kind of, if I can say, social determinant factors which will lead to a question, right, whether robots needs rights or not. And I remember recently there was a hue and cry in, I think it was a European commissioned group of scientists wrote an open letter, if you will, challenging the whole concept of robo rights, right, saying that they're not humans, they don't have an existence, right? But the moment we as humans, as I said, are engaging more and more with each other, less in person, even when we are sitting across the table, we tend to possibly message each other or experience each other in a metaverse kind of world. I think it is important to address this point. So robo rights as a reality in a virtual world is going to be something which we really need to contemplate on.
But I mean, just going back there a bit, Dr. Karthik. Now, if we are looking at robots and kind of trying to understand them in a very human way, I mean, because sadness, anger, whatever it is, the emotions I see and I know in another person is what I kind of assume that the robot also has. So why not give the kind of rights I am privileged with to this robot? Why does it require a separate set of rights?
I think it's because more and more, as you see, we've passed the industry. I think we are in industry 5.0 revolution. So more and more the machines and not just robots are getting autonomous, right? So we have artificial implants. And so I come from the healthcare industry, right? So where we are talking about bots getting into the bloodstream, we are talking about bots predetermining certain, say, cancerous conditions or life-threatening conditions, right? So somewhere we find ourselves in a world where our existential question or the reality of our existence is in a way dependent or determined more and more by bots, right? So for me to, for example, to get to Analytics India magazine today, let me give you a very crude example. I got locked down into a street because Google's satellite systems made a mistake, right? So can I talk about the right of either Siri on my phone or the Google bot which brought me there through the satellite navigation system to get me into a state of anxiety and worry, not reaching on time for this interview? Can I say therefore that me as a human, I have a right to get upset, whereas the machine on the other side, or the algorithm or the bot, does not have a right. So for many people, this may sound crazy, but I think it is pertinent, because let's take extreme situations, as I said, where life existence is under threat, or where there's a dependence on, let's say, safety. You talk about autonomous vehicles, right? So suppose there is a grave mistake in the algorithm of path navigation, or whatever, image detection and collision detection, and it just goes and rams into somebody, an electric car on its own, and autonomous. So whom would you hold responsible? Would you hold the programmer? Would you hold the car? Would you hold the human behind the wheels? Or would you hold the producer of the car? So it's a very pertinent point. Therefore, it's not about what rights robots have, but I think it is important to define a framework of, if I can say, values, a system of values, a system of almost akin to, I would say, a code of conduct, just like the three laws of robotics, right, which are pretty universal. I think we should look at robo rights from that angle, versus just looking at it from saying that are they living, or experiencing a state of consciousness, and therefore they also have to have a right. So we're never going to see, in my opinion, an era where robots are going to go and fight for their rights, or they're going to take over the world, like many Hollywood movies often show us. I don't think we're far from that, hopefully, fingers crossed. But at the same time, it will be important to define the boundaries of the value systems, and we need to go a little bit deeper into that. Yeah, that's my take.
There's an interesting point that you made there, that we as humans, we have a sense of anxiety with perhaps a robot taking over. What a lot of people call the uncanny valley theory, that I'm very anxious, or I fear that someday this thing is going to do something bad to me. And most of this, as far as I have, at least in my research, it kind of stems from the kind of image Hollywood has portrayed. Like, I mean, there are probably just a handful of instances where a robot did something good, or they showed, okay, this is just like any other, being. What kind of an impact would such a public image of robots have in the overall, cultural fit? Because if we are going to, if they are going to develop these emotions eventually, and we are going to live together as one society, there needs to be that cultural fit, right?
Absolutely. So on the lighter side, I think it stems from which Hollywood movie is your favorite, right? So if you're a Transformers fan, you would want robots to have their rights, because there are the good parts and the bad parts. And if you're looking at the kind of Terminator movies, you don't want the robot to have a right, because the intention there was more to annihilate, except the one which was protecting the protagonist. But jokes apart, I would say that the way I experience my reality, let me take a little bit of a philosophical context in a technology conversation. If you think about it, we are sitting on a huge cosmic object, which we call the Earth, which is spontaneously and, I would say, autonomously moving around just by the force of gravity, with 9 other smaller or larger celestial objects. And today we have placed on the orbit of just 12 to 14 kilometers above the Earth's surface many of these autonomous machines, right? So whether the Hollywood movies become a reality or not, the reality of, say, as scientists often fear, they talk about an asteroid coming and destroying the entire, and we've seen that in the past. We've seen dinosaurs, it's been established scientifically, got extinct by that. So there are several, if I can say, factors and circumstances beyond our normal human life, if you will, which are going to impact the safety and, I would say, the continuity of the human race. Now, in an already volatile environment which has so many uncertainties and complexities of the day-to-day life, and the ambiguity of life today, I would say the ambiguity has been largely, in a sense, reduced for tasks which are predetermined, right, where we know that the outcomes are pretty much bounded. But let's take situations where we have inserted, as I said, in mission critical systems. Recently, in the very same course at IISc, we were talking about plane engines. Okay, the fact that the cost of aviation is so high today that the companies producing these engines are now asking to run the engines off the cloud. So imagine, we've all experienced autopilot or auto navigation in our transport system. But imagine if the flight is completely controlled, both the engines, by not the pilot, but by some algorithm which is running on the cloud, right? And the only situation in which there would be a human intervention, right, is when there is a malfunction of the engine, or where maybe certain technology parameters fail, and therefore the backup systems don't get activated, and then the human intervention happens. So why am I giving this example again? So more and more we are moving towards a world where we are trusting, right? There's a basis of trust in which we are enabling technology to, I would say, control our life, right? So when you automatically or in a very subtle way have trusted the machines, if I can use that word, to take care of the safety of your life or to take care of the convenience in your life, why wouldn't you want to consider the fact that these machines or these robots or these technology interventions also act within a certain realm of rights, right? So they are bounded by certain rules. Now, there's another example. I remember in my childhood, I think it's almost maybe 30 years back, my dad got me a very interesting toy from, I think it was from China. So you needed to groom a pet, on the small device. I'm sure you have seen that too,
Yes.
right? And it's almost as if it is a living thing. It would cry, it would ask for food, it would say, I'm thirsty, give me water. So you just would keep pressing different combinations of buttons, right? And then there would be a smiley. And this is before the era of smartphones or anything, right? So whoever talk about that, whoever even invented that, I would really salute that person. So we already started looking at machines in a particular way where, and again, these were kids who were able to maximum express those kind of emotions. So in that context, and in the perspective which I have shared here of more and more machines kind of monopolizing our life with our consent, right? I think it is important to draw the boundaries and again look at specific aspects of rights. And are we also, in a sense, now the difference, I would say, in the state of being, right, or state of consciousness in life is that we as humans experience emotions, we experience pain, we experience sadness, we experience happiness. Now, the ones which I spoke about here, these feelings or emotions are not experienced by robots, right? So you would not want to put a robo right around a robo being, if I can say, ill-treated or abused by a human, right? But you could put a robo right around the safety of a robot as well, because imagine a situation where we speak about the moral machine and so many other experiments, right? So imagine typically in the moral machine we talk about just one autonomous object and the rest of them are all humans. But in a world where, let's say, there are going to be flying taxis, and we're going to see like more and more autonomous objects interact with each other, then the rights of the robots in such a situation, I think, has to be closely analyzed and studied, because no longer do you just have humans behind the wheels of the machines, but you actually have machines interacting with each other, and you would want to make sure they don't violate, the safety or the standards which we as humans have designed for them to function. Yeah.
Right. And more on that topic, Dr. Karthik. See, when we talk about rights, as things stand today, we kind of are in kind of a polarizing debate on where people are with robot rights. So, at one corner we have one part of people who are okay with giving a robot citizenship, but in the other corner we cannot an AI or a robot cannot have a patent with, I mean, in their name. A robot cannot say that I built this, even though it rightly did. So what should be the protocol here? I mean, where should we even begin if, okay, we all do say, okay, fine, let us start building a framework?
No, I think it's too early to talk about citizenship and if I can say intellectual property ownership or say copyrights by robots. But I think the way I would do it is I'd kind of break it up mentally, and I'm just trying to mind map this in a kind of a matrix, right? To say that in what, as I said, environments are we considering these rights, right? So if, for example, we have two countries, or let's say two competitors or companies, big tech companies building, say, algorithms, right, which are self-learning on their own, right? So obviously today the law is written that the company which has designed these algorithms, even if these algorithms self-learn and improve themselves through machine learning, the IP rests with the company. So that's a no-brainer. So you're not going to have a situation where even a piece of code is going to ask or challenge the ownership or copyright of a kind of innovation which it has come up with. Or let's say in so many examples we've seen of chess and complex games being played by robots, you're not going to see that. However, let's take another situation. If you carry a pet on the flight, right? So do you talk about citizenship for your pet? I mean, you take your pet from one country to another, right? So I haven't seen, and it happened to one of my colleagues who came from the US, and he somehow managed to ship his pet a few weeks before, then checking his pet into a pet hotel back in the United States. So we were jokingly asking, so has the American pet now become an Indian pet, or what happens if it grows here, if it breeds and it grows a family? So we're not going to get into that. Similarly, they're giving you a very naive example here, but the reason I'm giving that example, so imagine tomorrow as robots become more of our companions, right? I take my phone with me. I mean, my phone is as good as a semi-functional robot today. It can practically do anything for any of us, right? So I'm not going to talk about citizenship because I bought this iPhone in the US and I moved to India after purchasing it. I'm not going to apply for a citizenship. So I think it's more important, as I said, therefore, to look at robo rights in the realm or the boundaries of the kind of environments, right? So is it physical virtual? Is it physical physical? Is it virtual virtual? Right? So what are we talking about, right? And in these environments where there is, say, an interaction, again, it gets a little bit, if I can say, complex, because you're looking at then within this physical, virtual, or virtual, is there a human intervention or not, right? And then to what extent do you want to protect, as per the famous three laws of robotics, the existential safety of the human operator, if you will, right? Now, in a completely virtual situation, now, here I would say robot rights would become very important, because today we live in a world which is constantly threatened, not just by bio warfare. We live in seeing a world where countries are attacking each other with more automated machines, pilotless, if I can say, missile heads and drones. We've seen all of these, right? So what happens to robo rights in that context? It's very essential to define that. So let's say you have a rogue drone or a bot flying in from an enemy country into another country, right? You would definitely need to have some way of identifying the good robot in this case with the bad robot, right? So identifying, maybe, I think what will be useful before we step into robo rights is, how do we universally identify this, right? Just like the IMEI IDs in our phones. Let's first define the existence of robots, right? So we as humans exist because of a state of consciousness, state of feeling, state of emotion. But today a robot, I think, also comes with, many of these at a chip level do come with their own unique identifier. And from there, do we want to start classifying, right? What is the source or what is the origin of this robot, right? And are there relevant rights applicable to robots in that country? I gave an example of this letter or this representation by, I think, the European Union, right? So in European countries, I think they're dead against calling anything as a robo right? So if you manufactured, say, a robot there, right, would any rights apply to that robot if it is, say, implemented in another country which is non-European, right? So once we have defined through these, if I can say, existential identifiers for robots and for automated machines, the next step would be to look at, as I said, the circumstances, the role of humans in that, and what are the, I would say, the most common, if I can say, feelings or emotions which humans would express in such a world then, right? Because that is very important. Even the example of this big tech which you referred at the start of the conversation, I think increasingly as people are interacting with machines and robots, we are forgetting to interact with humans, right? We are losing that, if I can say, literally what we call the human touch, right? The human touch, if you will. So do we have to then define robo rights in the context of where do we draw the line, right? So that tomorrow we don't want people to develop, if I can say, anxiety disorders or hallucinations that a robot is real, right? And they don't do something to the robot, right? I mean, not just in happiness or sadness. Let's say there is somebody's electric car lying there, right? So is a car protected by somebody who has gone berserk and who does some damage to the car, or if there's a kid playing there, and so where do we draw the rights of at least protecting the framework or the condition of that machine or that robot? I think in those aspects, right, which I spoke about, and just to summarize, right from identification, the kind of environments, physical, virtual, whatever they're operating in, the kind of human intervention, and lastly, what are the kind of human emotions or feelings which can come out of such interactions, right? So I think once we define that solid foundational framework, we'll be in a position to expand on this. And I'm aware of some of researchers in MIT and Stanford actually going deep into this area, but I'd say still it is fuzzy in the sense it is evolving, and I think only time can tell us if robo rights will become a full-fledged reality. In my opinion, it does not apply yet completely to the world with which we interact and we live in.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
I think the whole concept of if we were to create such an intelligent robot that it has or mimics a human personality, so thoroughly, we would need to reach what a lot of people call AGI first. And I mean, that would be the beginning of all the other things.
Right.
So, in your opinion, would we be achieving AGI state, in the next 5-10 years, in our lifetime? What do you?
I think I think that is some time away. But here is the point, right? So today in healthcare, again, I go back to my favorite example. You see these implants, these space. So what if tomorrow, to extend, say, the very life or existence of a human being, right? We kind of make ourselves half android, or half human, if it is ever possible, right? If we extend our life, just like through pacemaker, suppose there's a medical miracle or an intervention to create something which is an artificial heart, right? Or an artificial limbic system for a person who's, so in that case, right? Now let's look at it, right? So let's say somebody who is having these artificial implants or this advanced machinery, and what are the boundaries in which that combination of a human and a machine should operate in, right? So let's say there is a grave error, or either in innocence or completely intentional. Somebody does something, right, with say their automated arm or something, right? They shoot somebody else, or so. In those situations, I think it would be pretty interesting to see, right? What would you do, right? You can imagine a state when we're actually half human and half robot or half virtual, whatever you want to call that, and we end up in situations where the laws are violated, right? Would you just punish the human side of thing and you would reuse or recycle the part which is not human, or are you going to completely eliminate? Or are you going to say that it's only his left hand, which is the human hand, which committed the error, and the right, which is not human, or something which was not involved directly in that act of negligence, is that going to be punished? So I think we are sometime away while we've gone down to the level of DNA encoding. So many medical marvels around us today, but I think the state which you're envisioning for me still is a super Hollywood film, right? So my opinion is we are maybe many thousand years away from that, and it will take some time to get to that space. And I think more than this, what will be very useful is we as humans, as somebody famously said, right? Even if all humans got extinct on this planet, and God forbid that, but if it did, the entire existence would continue, right? So imagine now we live in a world which is, I would say, 10 to 15%, connected with robots and whatnots, bots, and all of these things. So is this situation of where robots are going to overpower humans, or take over suppose the Matrix sequels become the movie Matrix sequels become a reality? Who would you hold accountable, right? So somewhere at that point of time, or the increasing threat of newer and larger scale world wars and global terror, I think it will be important to have a framework ready. We should evolve this, and it's not just in terms of half human, half robot, but more and more as we see these autonomous devices being used in so many different fields of application, we'll have to define, I would say, some robo rights and something around at least the basis or the foundation of this.
Right, right. And, perhaps my last question here, Dr. Karthik. Given that, as humans, we've had the tendency to take some of the best technologies and achieve some of the worst possible things with it, things like, artificial general intelligence, robots that can, perhaps automate our entire life. Do we even need to be trying? I mean, do we even have to think of building such things, knowing fully well that as humans, our ability to handle such scenarios has been extremely poor?
Correct. I think we should stay away from if I can say, situations or circumstances which can become detrimental to human existence. And certainly, I would not recommend too much of research in that area. But just like everything else in life, where there's a good and a bad side, it will be important to constantly at least study, if I can say, counter methods to what rogue efforts in this direction can lead to, right? So if we are only talking about things which, Krishna, you and I read about or know about or have researched about, but unknown to us, a lot could be happening, at a totally different level of human existence, where people could be building such machines, such bots. God forbid, I mean, I don't want the worst Hollywood movie to become a reality. But I think one thing a machine can never imitate, which for me is actually not just a human but a artificial intelligence impossibility, is this power of intuition, right? The feeling of consciousness, which is so deep and embedded in us as human beings, which we still have not uncovered. Right? And I'm not getting religious or philosophical here, but there is this abstract aspect of what we call the self, right? Which nobody is able to pinpoint and talk about. But there is something deep within us which guides, which talks to us, which tells us what to do. I don't think, today we talk about souls of corporation. I don't know if you heard about it. So we say that corporates have a soul. So will a machine ever have a soul? Will a machine ever have a sense of innate, existence or feeling? Or it could have biases based on the way it is programmed, right? So unless a human intentionally builds it with these feelings, or say a programmer intentionally builds a bot, say, with kind of emotions to react to different situations, I think the reality or the virtual reality which you and I are talking about is still a few light years away for me. Yeah.
Well said, Dr. Karthik. And I think, with that, I have everything that kind of question I had in mind answered. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, and great interacting with you again. And on the lighter side, I'll end by saying that let's vote for robo rights in the future, because in my opinion, they still need to be taken care of just as much as we do from our safety and existence. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.